Hello viewers and welcome to Daily Politics. On this program we discuss issues around politics, policy and governance. I am Shafiu Suleiman. President Bola Tinubu has called on Nigerians to make sacrifice for a better tomorrow, while playing host to the Southwest Muslim leaders who paid him a courtesy call at the presidential villa. The president's plea may not be unconnected to the increasing hardship being faced by Nigerians as a result of some top policy options, such as removal of fuel subsidy and floating of the nation's currency, the naira. But while Nigerians continue to grapple with the astronomical increases in the prices of food items, transportation, petrol and cooking gas, as well as general cost of living in the face of dwindling value of the naira, hyperinflation and declining purchasing power, the nation's lawmakers are to tear leathers of brand new SUVs costing the country over 57 billion naira. On Daily Politics, we ask, who is making what sacrifice? And who bear the brunt of difficult policy options? And joining us to discuss these issues and more are Salahuddin Hashim, a civil rights activist, and Ahmed Sajo, who I call a right-wing politician, a refined politician. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having us.
Now, we will have to take a break. When we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us. Thank you very much for staying with us, and now the conversation commences. Let me start with Alam Ahmed Sajo. Now, you've had our President Bola Tinubu, talking to Nigerians, now pleading, if you like, asking Nigerians to make sacrifices. It is not the first time, actually. Several other leaders have done so. Asking the ordinary people, the vulnerable, some will say, those at the receiving end to make sacrifices. The simple question many ask is, why not politicians? Why not the political elites? Why not the leadership? Why the sacrifice always has to be pushed to the ordinary people?
I think that's the irony. And in a very, very serious irony, that Nigerians will wake up every morning and begin to make sacrifices for the nation, while the leadership class, the leadership elite, and I dare say that we are also helping in misfocusing the attention in the media by just talking about the political elite. I tell you that the elite within the civil service are even worse than the political elite in terms of their inability to sacrifice anything, any of their entitlements. I think we have configured a system where there is a lot of sense of entitlement on the part of the leadership. And so when a leadership feels entitled, you do not ask them to make sacrifices, because whatever they give you, and look at it this way, in the entire National Assembly, for example, there is no one politician with sufficient conscience to say these new SUVs are scandalous and we're moving away from them, and we're going to insist that the sacrifices should start from this house.
Irrespective of the party they belong to.
Irrespective of party or location. When it comes to politics of defrauding the ordinary people, you will hear politicians bring issues of religion, issues of ethnicity, issues of region, location. They begin to be, they will start telling you this guy. But when it comes to this sense of entitlement on the part of politicians, all of these differences are dissolved. All they do is to assume their entitlement. And not only them, I am still emphasizing the top echelon of the civil service also speaks a lot of entitlement that you in the media do not focus on. They do more harm.
Okay, we'll look at some of those entitlements actually. But Salahuddin, talking about sacrifice, is there anything left for Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians, the poor people, to sacrifice? Some will say they have sacrificed their comfort. A number of them are living in displaced zones. You know, they can't go to farm. They are traumatized. They are poor. They can't, they're gasping for breath, some will say. Is there anything left for them to sacrifice more?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think perhaps we didn't hear very well. Maybe what the president and, of course, previous leadership has consistently told us is that we are the sacrificial lambs. And I think for me, that is exactly what we are, because you realize that every consequence of policy handle of government is actually being bared by citizens. And those who made these policies in one way or the other are not consumers of the same harsh policies that they have actually brought on the table. So the reality is,
unfortunately, they're part of the country.
No, they are part of the country. But of course, because
they have the capacity
they don't use part of their salaries to fuel, for instance. They do not use part of their salaries to buy food in their house, because they budget for these things separately. For instance, if you pick the budget of the State House here in Abuja, you will realize that there is a line item that goes into fueling. There's a line item that goes into procurement of food. And this thing is actually being supported by the country, and of course squeezing citizens as a way of actually complementing the luxury of leadership is something that requires a lot of attention. And we realize that over a very long period of time, the citizens have always been at the receiving end of all of these policy regimes that has come with consequences and attending. I mean, if you look at it, just oppose what the basic salary, or what you call the minimum wage, is against a bag of rice in this country. You know too well that you cannot in any way correlate what is the reality on the table plus what citizens, and considering all of those factors that you have actually raised from the beginning. So it tells you very clearly that citizens are being suffocated. So when the president came earlier and said that we should not suffocate the poor, that we should let the poor breathe, perhaps he had something else in mind, because as it is now, citizens are on life support machine. They cannot breathe properly. And I think we are telling the president, please let the poor breathe, because as it is, there is a really bit of a problem in the country.
Right, okay, before that, Ahmed, you're talking about moral consciousness. We have the same set of people who have gone around asking for people to vote for them because they want to go there and change the narrative. Some are talking about bad governance, and they're coming up with fresh ideas and all of that. We have political parties who emerged, and of course, a number of their members have, are now at the National Assembly, for instance, taking part in this largesse, if I should put it that way. Take, for instance, a senator is going home with this brand new SUV, Prado, sport utility vehicle, costing 160 million naira. This is in addition to salaries, allowances, and what have you. And the same politician, a senator, for instance, would go perhaps to his constituency and find people who cannot eat 3 square meals. He can go back home and find people who cannot even take their children to school, who cannot even, take a proper health, handle the proper health care of their family members. And this same person will come back to legislate, accept these largesse, and life goes on. What do we make up with the leadership, the essence of leadership?
Well, I think with all sense of responsibility, leadership emerges, or leadership operates within the context of the expectations of leadership that the citizens have. I have been at leadership positions at different times. And I must tell you that if there is one style of leadership that is not appreciated, it's my own type. I take exactly what belongs to me, and so as a result, there are a lot of other things that other politicians do that I cannot do, because you cannot do them within the
Is it because you don't have the opportunity to do it?
No.
Because you felt it is not right to do
it within the confines of your legitimate income. For you to go beyond call to duty, to go and distribute money or distribute certain things to some individuals within the political class, you have to go beyond your legitimate income. And if you don't do that, you get, there was even a petition against me that I shouldn't be made a leader because I was quote and unquote.
You're kind of a straight person.
No, but I'm just trying to tell you that if these senators and reps members don't go home with new Prado Jeep, some of their constituencies will start cursing them that you are not a good leader. We the citizens have set up a template. Let me tell you, the scandalous ceremonies that we hold in the face of this excessive poverty, we have about 60% of our population in multidimensional poverty. Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand what multidimensional poverty is.
More are still falling into the bracket. And in the last couple of months, we're talking about 40 million.
Wait now, do you know what multidimensional poverty means? There are poverty of funds, there are poverty of food, poverty of water, poverty of shelter, poverty. In fact, it reaches a point where there are people that cannot afford toilets. This is how bad the level of poverty is. But when we organize our elite-inspired ceremonies, wedding, naming, call it whatever you want to do, we lavish so much food and whatever drinks, and we spray currency scandalously to the face of everybody, believing that we are entitled to do what we're doing. And I think that's where we have missed it all. We have to be sensitive to the realities of our environment. We live in a country where some people import their dog food from abroad every week, while some people eat from the dustbin. The social inequality, the social gap had never been this wide in our history. And it is widening further. Right. So just a minute. Yeah. My plea to my fellow brothers who are in politics, brothers and sisters that are in politics, and my plea to those of us here that are members of the ruling elite is that we should begin to be a little bit sensitive. We are taking Nigerians' resilience for granted. We are resilient. I know, because I come from an area where we were overrun by Boko Haram and our town was taken over and the name changed and we bounced back. So people think that this resilience and this our capacity to bounce back from disaster is inexhaustible, is inelastic. Yeah. I believe there's a limit.
But how long this will continue, Salahuddin? For instance, looking at the indices, they are not getting any better. For instance, if you're talking about food item prices of food item, they keep going up. You're talking about fuel price, even with the increase, it's still increasing. We're talking about the rate of inflation is still going up. The naira is on the free fall. We're talking about 120, 1,200 naira at the parallel market to $1, and it keeps going on. The projection is that it might even get to another level. So, how conscious are this political or leadership elite, in terms of the level of resilience and the level of what the ordinary people can accommodate?
Unfortunately, there don't seem to be any possibility of changing templates, because the same template we had thought should shift has also been reintroduced. And that template that has been reintroduced is the culture of waste that we have. We need to have a way of creating structural adjustment in public expenditure, because cost of governance year on year has consistently increased. And if you check cost of governance, as a matter of fact, should be able to translate into development. And if you check cost of governance for several years, it has always been for purposes of recurrence or for purposes that actually goes into waste, and nothing goes into capital development. And that in itself has created this sort of citizens' apprehension in our political leadership. You give each members of the National Assembly, or let's say the Senate, a vehicle worth 160 million.
That's for the Senate. And for the House of Reps, we're talking about 135 to 145.
Now, if you do a math of that money, you should be able to tell you clearly how many schools that can build, particularly for areas where we have over 10.5 million out-of-school children. That in itself can give us a number of increase in school enrollment. We should be able to do that. Government is talking about subsidizing education and offering loans to students. How much has gone into that particular scheme as a grant? We haven't seen that budget yet. We are talking about poverty alleviation, food, malnutrition, child mortality, maternal mortality. All of these indicators are threatening lives, and we have seen situations where access to primary health care hasn't been fantastic. And these are some of the things that we had thought that this particular regime, considering that we have a president who has an antecedent of developmental drives, but unfortunately, I think he made too many promises. And now, because the politics in electioneering was actually setting, and then of course he had to repay and compensate those politicians that were with him through thick and thin, and then he has now been consumed by the entire politicking of governance, and that is exactly where we are. So that template isn't changing. Until the template changes, we might still have the same situation.
Thinking about changing the template, and we are coming with a renewed hope, an administration that gives Nigerians hope that things will change for the better. But here we are talking about cost of governance. I was talking about, how things are getting worse rather than getting better. We have a president who, I'm sure, is also conscious of the need to cut the cost of governance. But here we are with a ministerial cabinet of 51 members, as against 42 that we used to know. Even at that, it was said it was high, but we accommodate. I mean, we are now having 51-member cabinet. We are having a cabinet that is going 8.6 billion naira, in terms of salaries and allowances. And then we also have a regime that instead, perhaps of shrinking, if you like, or bringing together some of the ministries, departments, and agencies, it's rather unbundling and making them even bigger. Take, for instance, we have a Ministry of Information, which is now 3 ministries in one. Information, national orientation, culture, creative economy, and then tourism. 3 ministries in one. How can we explain to Nigerians, what renewed hope means?
I think we are missing the point. I agree with you that we're expecting a shrinking in the cost of governance. But the expansion in the cost of governance is not bad in itself. The intention was meant to drive efficiency, to micromanage sectors as drivers of development or progress in the system.
Aren't you conscious of what that means in terms of naira and kobo?
Wait. If you have one ministry that is supposed to hold 3 or 4 sectors, and it's unable to hold any one of them correctly, you've saved costs, but you've increased inefficiency. If you unbundle that, and each one of these sectors becomes more productive, at the end of the day, you may achieve the goals you want to achieve. That is not the question. The question now is, what is the monitoring mechanism that we have that ensures value for money? Even if you have, no matter what, if there is value for money. For example, when we had one Ministry of Transport, it was in charge of aviation, it was in charge of railways, it was in charge of marine economy, it was in charge of road
infrastructure.
At the end of the day, for very many years, we had no railways functioning. We lost our shipping line. Our aviation was a plague. until we began to unbundle them. Now, the aviation is doing pretty well, I must confess. We have railways are running here and there. Now, with the marine and blue economy, we hope that we will intervene appropriately in the maritime sector, including, of course, fishing within our water. So, I'm not looking at, what I'm looking at is that a system, a country, a nation is driven by systems and values. What are our own values? You're talking about political parties. Why all of them are receiving
part of the...
Do you know why? Because in strict sense of it, we do not have a political party in Nigeria.
So all that citizens are being told...
What we have are special purpose vehicles for winning elections. Because the Constitution does not recognize independent
Even
candidature.
the ideology is lacking.
There is no ideology. Yeah. I said they are SPVs, special purpose vehicles. You want to win an election, then you must be accepted in one party. And those parties are mirror image of each other. That's why if I run to this party and they refuse to give me a candidature, I quickly run to the next one. And if I pick it, I feel comfortable. There was a time I assisted a system based on my abhorrence of injustice, and that system resulted in somebody becoming a governor. Then he now called me and said, okay, what position will I give you in my government? I said, which party is your government? He said, I am this particular party. I said, but I don't belong to that party. I belong to another party, so I cannot pick a job in your own party. Do you know that I started getting courses even from within my immediate family?
You fail to go to where you will get something that you extend to.
Yeah. So
if I get your...
For you to hold even so... We need systems and values.
Okay.
Even if you have 100 ministers, what is your value?
You think
what are they supposed to do?
You think there is justification for the expansion of the machinery of government in the face of dwindling resources to cater for other critical needs?
Resources, if those economies perform, if those sectors perform very well, we will recover. Let me give you an example. Well, government is an enabler. You understand?
Yes.
Are you surprised that in Nigeria today, in areas where we have heavy government, we have recorded relative failure? In areas where we have very little government, we have recorded a lot of success. Does that not tell you that there is a gap? If you go to anywhere in the world, travel to anywhere, go to a Chinese restaurant if you like, the likelihood is that the music, if they play 4 music, one of them is from Nigeria.
Okay, Mr. Salahuddin, you said something earlier which actually drew my attention now. I think, yes, you said that, talking about the quality, the kind of people we have at our representative level. For instance, someone who will be comfortable, to be part of this arrangement, part of the deepening of the state capture, some will say, because the political elite, the leadership elite, corner the resources for themselves. Now, someone who comes from a village or who comes up from a place where he knew actually that the people there are desperately in need of certain basic amenities, some are even displaced, and then yet he can afford to collect this vehicle, 160 million naira, drive through the deserted areas or the displaced community, and even wave hands, for instance, and then the same people come up to say, oh, and hell, this is our representative, he has come of age, look at the kind of vehicle. Where are we missing it, in terms of our understanding of what governance actually means?
I think we are just like a deer as a country running in the forest or a desert without a specific direction. Every development in the world have a model. Nigeria does not have a model for development. We borrow from China today. Page 2 of our economic development will take to UK and take a model, and page 3 we take the US growth approach and adapt it, and that in itself has consistently allowed us to become cyclical in the approach of our developmental efforts. So that is the reason why, yes, my senior colleague had mentioned that there are no ideology that drives the people. 2, we do not have any specific roadmap for development. 3, we don't even know how many are we in this country. Every development must come with planning, and you cannot plan without knowing the numbers. So we don't even know how many are we. I have seen a prototype of what Singapore and Malaysia will be in the next 50 years. Okay, they have the prototype. They know where flatlands are today, where they will become high rises tomorrow. They know where will become commercial nerves in the next 20 years. They know where will become economic nerves. So all of those development planning had gone into place. Unfortunately, we do not have them, and because again we have a followership that is very docile, and because people know too well that winning election requires you to become to commercialize the process, and we know that poverty has been weaponized, ethnicity has been weaponized. So long as you deploy this weapon, that you can consistently win and get the larger followership of the people. Why? Because the people themselves have lost the true essence. I'll give you one simple example. If you run one particular popular TV show where people are meant to casting their vote, you would get millions of votes. As a matter of fact, the monies meant for the to bankroll that comes from people's votes. Okay, people who watch at home. It has no value. It does not add to any intellectual, but people vote massively. But of course, come out and vote leadership that will actually shape governance. Exactly. And people will not come out to vote for that. So people, they have also understand the psychosocial demographics of Nigerians, and they're actually selling them in that particular way. And that is the reason why we consistently have a followership that is docile and dogmatic, and itself has now been run by an elite that has captured the entire society. As we speak today, there are people in the house who are arguing that no, this guy is telling lies, that why would my senator not, just like he hardly say, that because he rejected it, people from his own household are coming to say, look, you have not done correctly well. That is where the problem started.
Right. But then, do Nigerians have option? For instance, you know, we may perhaps not, you talked about weaponization of poverty, you know, the level of, and so on and so forth. And then again, we're also looking at the fact that substantially people now believe that even their vote does not count. For instance, a number of them will come out to vote, but in the end, they will tell you it is not what they voted for. And then we are now beginning to see how elections are even won at courts, you know, not in the ballots, and so on. So how do we reconcile these issues? Citizens are beginning to resign to fate that, okay, nothing happened.
No, I think fatalism is not an option, but to say we are not fatalistic is also to lie. People have become complacent and fatalistic. In this part of the country, what we say is and we just forget it and leave it like that. Other people are resigning to fatalism, and it's not the best of this thing. But you see, again, you know, it's about the state. Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do because I was trying to give you an example. Government as an enabler had failed us in some areas, but we have risen above the limitations of government. Our music has risen above limitations of government. Our film industry has risen above the limitations of government. Our ICT, whether you call it Yahoo or you call it whatever,
whether it is positive or negative,
but it has risen above the limitations set by government. Now, it's left for government to study what makes those ones succeed and see whether they can apply the same principles in core areas.
Well, you're talking about resilience earlier on. Perhaps it is not because of the enabling environment. It is because people, Nigerians...
No, we are abusing our resilience. We are taking our resilience for granted. There's a limit. And let me tell you the limit. you know, when there is an elbow room, you could forgive each other. You could live with each other peacefully. When you are crammed into a situation where if you move your elbow, you will hit your neighbor, you will begin to look at each other and reconfigure the way you live with your neighbor. There is still some elbow room. We shouldn't allow it to reach a level where there will be no elbow room. Because, you see, the resilience I'm talking to you is that I come from a village. I understand the village lifestyle. It's totally different from those of us that are in the city. The village person is so contented with little that we're taking that for granted. But there is going to be a limit. My own advice is that those of us that are in the elite ruling class, we must begin to become sensitive. The key word is insensitivity. We see the poverty and despondency in our communities as
is it detached? Or?
We're not only detached from it, but we see it as, well, a deserved situation of our people. Some of us even have this expression that this is the laziness of the people or their incapacity to be wise, quote and unquote, that put them on this. But I think that our policies and our lack of direction, and we must be honest, you know, if President Bola Tinubu wants to change this country, he must create a direction. Whether it is a painful direction or whatever,
for the ruling elite,
for the whole country, we must travel a road. You know, somebody was telling me this morning that a tree does not make a forest, that one person cannot change. But I tell you that leadership is one tree that makes a forest. When you enter a plane, all of you are there. You could be hundreds in that plane. You have to but the forest there is not you, is the pilot.
That's right. Okay, leadership is key, you know, to providing a direction towards, you know, a better destination.
We need to develop a direction.
Thank you. I think we have to go on a short break. In case you're just joining us, the program is Daily Politics, and today we're looking at the call by President Bola Tinubu on the citizens to make sacrifices for a better tomorrow. And we're asking who will make the sacrifice and who will bear the brunt of all these leadership challenges that we're facing in our country. And we've been interfacing with Ahmed Sajo, former information commissioner in Adamawa State, a politician, but his own politics comes with a difference. Well, and Salahuddin Hashim is a civil rights activist. Together we'll be looking at these issues very closely. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation. Stay with us. Thank you very much. Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, you're watching Daily Politics on Trust TV. Do well to follow us across all our social platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and watch us live on YouTube. Back in the studio, we're discussing the President Bola Tinubu's call for citizens, or rather on citizens to make sacrifices for a better tomorrow. Or tomorrow's Nigeria, okay? If this tomorrow's Nigeria is actually coming, because virtually all the regimes will tell you about a better days ahead. Nigerians are yet to see these better days. Okay, we're back. Salahuddin, let's look at, you know, the people themselves. Are they asking for too much? Because if you look at it, ordinary Nigerians, some say the most easiest people to govern, you know, are people like Nigerians. Are they asking for too much? They don't get security in most cases. There is no water, no shelter, no basic amenities of life, but yet they are still loyal to the government. And we're not calling on people to rise up against government, but then are they asking for too much?
Yeah, I think the fact is that they have actually endured so much, actually. And then, of course, the posture of government or governance actually also determines the resilience and the reception from the people. Just over the weekend, I watched President Biden called the families that were just released by the Hamas, just two of them, and he spoke to them. I mean, you know what that sense of psychological connection gives you to patriotism. It tells you very clearly that, look, the state where I come from, I represent, has a particular interest in my survival. And then, of course, not just my physical survival, but, of course, provide some kind of social security for me, because they know too well that beyond my physical security, that I require social security, and we know how all of those things play out. A friend of mine just told me that on a monthly basis, $1,050 gets into a particular card for the 3 children, because they get $350 monthly just to buy food. They shouldn't use that thing for anything, just to buy food. And that whatever thing he procures at the end of 1 month, he doesn't spend more than $800, even in Nigerian grocery store. So literally government fits in, okay? And then, of course, at the particular time in the year, you go for tax refund, they give you tax. All of these things put together, you will realize that it is a system that has functioned, that has been tested, that has now come to realize the value of its people. But unfortunately here, once there is a need for once government has a feeling of going broke, you think of increasing fuel, the people must bear the brunt. Then you think of increasing tax, the people must bear the brunt. You think of increasing tax on data.
Even education.
The people must bear the brunt. You increase education, you increase healthcare, you increase medicine, those basic things that should be free to the people, then they suddenly become taxable. And those are the areas you go after. You look at basic items, you go after them. There is no staple food in this country anymore. Rice, bread, gari, which used to be very staple, have now become very luxurious items in the market. This, for me, people have suffered and endured this over the time. We are so resilient to the extent that we find alternative medicines for ourselves. We are so resilient to the extent that we buy our own food. We are so resilient to the extent that we dig our own water.
Even provide our security.
Water board on an annual basis makes budget but never provides water. So we are in a country where we say water, water everywhere, but there's no water to drink. People drill their own water, and that in itself is giving us environmental factor. People have to assess their own medical care because government institutions in that regard has actually failed. People create their own transportation system. These are basic things. Government has failed to make those kind of provisions. People on their own make provision for security. This is the first order of the state, the protection of lives and property. Government has failed in that particular regard. So how else do we want to delineate or create a posture of the fact that people have endured? How much more would we or the people want to endure? People on their own have created a number of infrastructure that ordinarily should be by government. You stay in a particular locality, you contribute money and procure transformer, and then of course it becomes government property. You procure pole and it becomes government property.
Exactly.
These are things that government should do. Individuals are doing it, people are doing it, and yet they have nothing to benefit other than living within the geographical location that is called Nigeria. That is the only thing that people benefit.
Okay, on the other side of the divide, Mohammed, how do we get those who have excessive energy while others are gasping for breath? You know, how do we get them to make sacrifices? Because the sacrifice didn't just come from the ordinary citizens who have been pauperized. What about the political? What about the elites? What about those that have cornered, substantial part of the resources? How much of sacrifice are they making, and what kind of sacrifice can they make for a better Nigeria?
I think the first thing we should start asking ourselves, what exactly happens to people who allegedly should change the system? Why did we remove subsidy? I am in support of removal of subsidy because the subsidy was actually be subsidizing the rich against the poor, even though at the end of the day the poor is bearing the brunt. But more than 60% of the subsidy payment were being paid to people who were not supplying fuel or anything.
Is the removal not doing the same thing?
Wait, I'm coming.
Because we have to look at where the money is
No, but what I'm saying is that, okay, now we said these were the people that were changing the system. You've removed the subsidy. Supposedly, you've identified the people that were benefiting. What steps have you taken to bring them to book and recover what they have taken?
Yes, sir.
Now you've moved the subsidy fund somewhere, and it has not been helpful to the ordinary citizens. Why? Because some people are sabotaging the process of making it seamless and work for the citizens.
So whichever way, it's not benefiting the ordinary people. It's not
benefiting the ordinary people. But who is taking any step towards it? That's number one. Number two, how come we have lost our humanity? We have lost our compassion. In other climes, when we have a situation like we have in Nigeria today, the rich and the powerful are the first that will lend hands of compassion to ordinary people, so as to cushion the effect of the hardship. But our rich and powerful would rather continue with the waste that brought us to where we are today than pull back and begin to look at the system with compassion. I think if I were to advise President Bola Tinubu, I'm coming. I just want to advise, if I were to advise the president, he should look for experts to advise him on how to tax the rich, or at least to increase, to create policies that forces the rich to also make sacrifices, whether they like it or not, so that those sacrifices from the rich can go to the ordinary people. As it is now, when you tax the ordinary people more, it's like, if I must say, taking from the needy and giving it to the greedy. And if
what an analogy.
No, it's like you're taking it from the needy and you're feeding it to the greedy. And we need to reverse that.
Right. Okay. Reversing this, how can we reverse it, Salahuddin? Looking at the nature of those on the other divide, they don't care, in spite of the fact that they are comfortable. But what they are still, they're still after the little that is even meant for the ordinary people. Now we're talking about palliatives, for instance. When there's removal of subsidy, the president decided that, okay, certain amount of money, should be set aside to cushion the effect. Again, grains were released. But how much of these grains are ordinary Nigerians seeing? In some cases, you find out that the grains that are being brought out are even grains that were kept during the COVID era. Some of them have spoiled. What kind of Ms. Ahmed is talking about humanity? Where is our humanity?
I think basically one of the first ways for us to reverse this trend is that we first of all need a civil service reform, because there are too many people in the civil service who are absolutely doing nothing. And when my guy here mentioned that we need to unbundle ministries to be able to get them to efficiency, I think we have a president who has a private sector background. And you know that in the private sector, if you work smart, just 40-50 persons can run one entire ministry efficiently, smartly, with some level of pragmatic approaches that can make you deliver what you need to do. Know your KPI, but you find in a unit
advocating for
20 persons
reduction of redundancy.
But my point is that the president himself has come out to say, look, they are barely trying to pay salaries. The overhead is actually very high. Maybe perhaps you don't want to reduce. Look, I'll tell you one thing.
What is he doing with the numbers?
Now let me tell you one thing. If you do today, you decide that you want to make civil service efficient and you don't want to create more poverty by sending people away, tell people, okay, indicate if you want to leave the system, you can take 50 million naira. Okay, even if you have 20 years to go, 15 years to go, as a way of reducing, you will give it so that you can create wealth. Okay, all these monies that we are doing handouts, taking loan of over $100 and something million, and we are giving it to hand out. There is no economic sense in it. I don't know where people borrow those templates. You are borrowing as handout and giving it out to people. Who brought that kind, whoever advised the president to do that or go that direction is an enemy of the state. Because to be very honest, there is no economic sense in it. I think the best thing to do is for us to be able to find proficient and efficient approaches that can make us use those monies to create additional wealth. You are giving somebody 15,000 naira every month, or 10,000 or 20,000 or 25,000
in the case of this conditional transfer.
For whatever reason. 25,000 naira cannot in any way remove poverty in it. But if you want to create wealth, what mechanisms have you created that can actually help people to regenerate wealth? Look, to be rich is one thing, to be wealthy is another thing. Wealth can be created to efficient institutionalization of certain structures that allow people to, but unfortunately, what we see today are just people who want to get rich or depend on government handouts. And then, of course, let me tell you also that the social register you are using, have they also checked the integrity of that social register?
I think they've done what they call the cleaning of the social register.
I think let me tell you something. You know, there's something he raised here. As a Muslim, I can tell you that there is a zakat.
Yeah.
What is the zakat supposed to do? The zakat is supposed to redistribute wealth. And so the Nigerian system of zakat giving is that we line up 1,000 people in front of our house and we give them 200 naira. But what zakat intends is that
when you are given, perhaps next year you will be the one to give another person.
Exactly. So you use it to create wealth. That's what he is saying.
That's right.
You know, once you are able to redistribute and create wealth among the people, so the people get what to do to also begin to create wealth.
Absolutely.
And so the multiplier effect of wealth creation will create a wealthy society. But when you give tiny drops of handout, what you are doing is actually you are multiplying poverty.
Absolutely.
I'm mocking the poor.
And when you multiply poverty, what you end up with is more poverty. The president has a very good intention. You know, the policies he's pursuing, as far as he is concerned, and you give it to him, are policies that could ameliorate the situation. But I am the one telling you that the more serious policies that can ameliorate this situation are policies that will create wealth among the people, not encourage the people to have idle consumption attitudes.
Very quickly, as we're rounding up, what do we do with the leadership? Do we require leadership reorientation, or what exactly do we need when we have leaders who are insensitive, you know, to the plight of the ordinary people who can accommodate, who will agree to be to have 57 billion naira spent on them on just utility vehicles when people are suffering and can't even afford 3 square miles. How do we do with that?
All we need is value reorientation for all of us in the country. What are the values that drive Nigeria? He has just told you. What are the instruments we have on ground to determine our policy direction in the next 1 year, 2 years? Then I add, what are the values that we hold dear? Do you think honesty is respected in this country? Do you think empathy is respected in this country?
Productivity is rewarded.
Do you think productivity is rewarded? Do you think even loyalty to the state, not to individuals who run the state, do you think that is... So it gives the impression that we are suffering from a state capture.
Okay, how do we get out of this capture, you know, very quickly, in just 1 minute?
we need to rejig our leadership selection process. Okay, political parties should have wing that run leadership academies. INEC, Electoral Institute, all of this infrastructure should have wings that run leadership academies, so that people will enroll and then of course should be a criteria for somebody to actually pursue public office, because they know that you have undergone certain tested processes that can actually throw you up for leadership.
Thank you very much, Salahuddin Hashim, a civil rights activist, and Ahmed Sajo, a right-wing politician, a refined politician, to put it that way. Thank you very much for your informed perspectives on this very important topic.
Thank you. It's a pleasure always.
Now, in case you're just watching us, this is where we come to the end of this conversation. You can do well by following us across all social media platforms. And of course, join us tomorrow where we come with another interesting package and personalities. Until then, on behalf of the technical crew, my name is Shafiu Suleiman. Thank you for watching.